Most land buyers understand that they're playing a long game. Okay, we all get that. But most of them, when they're doing the math up front, they don't fully get it. They'll look at things like price, they'll look at taxes, and they think that they're doing their due diligence. But then 10 years later, they look back and they're going over their spreadsheets and it's not adding up. They don't realize how much money they've dumped into that piece of land in the long haul. And the problem is, at that point, it's too late. At that point, they realize they could have put that money into other investments that could have moved their life forward more, and they really just ended up dumping it into a piece of land that's not worth too much more than what it was when they bought it. And that's why when I talk to land buyers, they don't understand. That regret never shows up at the closing table. You're excited, you bought that piece of land, you found a perfect piece of land. That's what I'm doing today. We're gonna jump into the math that nobody does. We're gonna look at what does it actually cost to own a piece of land for 10 years or more. You can project this out as far as you want. And this is the math that I use in my Texas Hill Country Legacy Blueprint call. So if you're thinking about moving to Central Texas or somewhere in the Texas Hill Country, there's a link down below to schedule that call for yourself. In that call, we're gonna map out potential red flags. We're going to talk about the math. We're going to talk about areas that would work for what your goals are. And we're going to build a clean, clear plan for you to move ahead in purchasing land without guessing. Because here's the thing, land has never been more popular, or I should say the idea of land has never been more popular. These videos are getting a ton of views. People are asking a lot of questions about this. And let's face it, people are getting tired of being pent up in cities. They're being tired of being pent up in neighborhoods and having no control over what they do and having other people dictate what their day-to-day life looks like. And on the surface, land as an investment seems to be really easy. You don't have to worry about tenants. You don't have to worry about toilets, no midnight phone calls. Just buy a piece of land, sit on it for 10, 15, 20 years and then sell it at a profit. Okay, seems really, really simple. If only it were that simple. The problem is land's silent. It doesn't tell you when it's underperforming. It doesn't tell you, hey, it might be a good time to sell because something's about to change in the market. It doesn't send you monthly statements that you can review at the end of the year and those statements are just screaming at you, hey, something's wrong here, take a look at this. And if you buy land without very, very specific intention, it's gonna drain away your time, it's gonna drain away money, and it's gonna drain away your flexibility while you're just assuming that everything's good. So let's jump right into it and talk about the first thing. If you've watched any of my videos before, you may have heard me talk about how, buying cheap land isn't really a great option and to avoid cheap land. Guys, I'm telling you, purchase price is probably the least important factor when you're talking about purchasing land. Now, you don't want to overpay, you want to get a good deal or the best deal that you can, but that purchase price is such a small factor in all of this, you've got to look beyond it. Let's say you find a great piece of land, you find 10 acres, $150,000. Okay, that seems reasonable. Everything else around there is priced in that same ballpark, so must be a pretty good deal. Let's see if I can negotiate down a little bit and move forward. But what you've got to realize is that purchase price, that's really just the entry fee for all that. Think beyond that. How long, if you're paying cash for this, how long is your capital locked up? If you're paying cash, is that capital, are you going to get a better year-over-year return in a piece of land? Or would it make more sense to invest it in the stock market or in some mutual fund? And regardless of whether or not you pay cash, what is it going to cost to hold that land year over year? Things like insurance, taxes, maintenance, clearing, improving that land. What are those costs year after year? What are the exit plans that exist? Do you have multiple exit plans? Are you just going to look to sell one piece of property? Are you looking to divide it up and sell smaller pieces of property? And if you have multiple exit plans, are they fragile or are they legitimate plans that you could execute any one of a number of them and get out of that land at a profit? I'm here to point out the obvious to you. Land is not cheap because that sticker price is low. Compare a $150,000 piece of land to a $300,000 house. Well, if that land costs you $5,000 or $10,000 a year to hold, it's gonna be a worse investment than buying a $300,000 house that produces a little bit of income every month and you come out of it at the end with a product that's appreciated at the same amount. And that's the first mental mistake that most land buyers make. They confuse that low priced with a low cost long term. Huge, huge mistake. So let's get into the first one of those holding costs. Let's talk about property taxes. Property taxes are probably one of the easiest costs to project out. I know there's some places like state of Texas, okay, it's a little bit harder to project it out because that land could go up in value every year, but even if you look long term, you're going to talk 3, maybe 4% increase in value. So even if the land value goes up and your property taxes go up year over year, you can still project that out long term. And for this, I mean, let's keep the math easy. $150,000 land purchase. Let's say your effective tax rate is 1.2% a year. Okay, that's $1,800 a year. You can project that out. If you're going to hold it for 10 years, it's $18,000. But like I said, if you see an increase in tax value potential, again, most states will go up over time. Texas is one. I own property in Colorado. Those rates go up as well. You do have to be able to project that out and escalate those yearly taxes based on some knowledge of the area. Because the thing is, you're being taxed by local entities, and they're always trying to get more tax base. So, you know, counties are growing, reappraisals happen, school district bonds get passed, things like that. So you're going to have that escalated tax. And just based on personal experience, I've seen taxes go from, you know, that $1,800 up to maybe $2,400, $2,500 a year by year 5 or 6 or maybe even 7. So you've got to project that in. Okay, yeah, you can run math calculations on it, but again, if you don't start with the knowledge that those tax rates can go up, you're going to end up at a loss long term. So now what you're thinking was going to cost you $18,000 in carrying costs just for taxes may end up over 10 years costing you closer to $22,000, $23,000, $24,000. Again, that makes a huge difference in your bottom line. And the thing about that tax dollar that you're just giving out, it doesn't increase your usability, it doesn't improve the land, it doesn't do anything. You're just taking that money and you are throwing it out. It is a cost of doing business for owning that land and just sitting still. The next one of those costs is maintenance costs. And look, a lot of people go, oh, I don't have to maintain land, it's just gonna be there and it'll be in the exact same shape that it was, you know, in 10 years that it was 10 years ago, and I'll just sell it. Okay. Huge misconception and a massive issue when it comes to owning that land for that long. Think about it as what we would call a slumlord, somebody who buys a single family house and just tries to throw renters in it and not make any improvements to the house over 10 years. It's the same thing with land. Over the course of 10 years, you're probably going to have driveway washouts. You're going to have to rebuild fence. You're going to have to clear brush back to maintain access to the property. And if you actually want it to increase in value significantly, you're going to have to go in there and you're going to have to clear out. You're going to have to get rid of brush. You're going to have to open up areas, you know, to increase grassland and things like that. All of this maintenance costs either time or money. And the larger that piece of property gets, the amount of time it takes becomes just basically insurmountable for most people. So then what are you going to be left with? You're going to be left with hiring somebody, or that maintenance isn't going to get done. So when you're thinking about this, even before, like this is before hiring, you know, people with skid steers and stuff like that to come out. I personally would safely calculate $1,000 to $3,000 a year in maintenance just to be safe. Now, if you're going to have somebody with bulldozers and skid steers and crews coming out, that can go $5,000, $10,000 a year. You know, if you're really trying to open it up and make that land something. Yes, it's tax deductible. Yes, it's something that's going to improve the value of the land. But it is also a carrying cost that you're going to have to factor in for the first year and every year after that. Again, the whole point of this video is to make you understand if you're going to hold this long term, there's costs that you may not be considering. This is one of them. And then going back, if your idea is not to really improve the land, just to maintain it and keep it in a good working order that somebody, think about it, the buyer's going to come out, they're going to walk the land. Hell, if they can't walk into the land, they're not going to buy it. So you have to keep it at least as a base maintenance level where people can get on and see what you've got. I mean, I've got a great story, case in point. My wife and I, the first land that we bought, actually the second land that we bought, is the place that we live on now. It was 3.5 acres, and when you drove there on the road, it was nothing but cedar trees. You could not get onto the land. So, I mean, I grew up in the country. I'm a little different than most people. We wove through the neighbor's land because I could tell there was a hill. Finally got up to the top of the hill about 15 minutes later after getting cut to crap in cedars and everything else. And I happened to go see an oak tree, climb up on the oak tree and look out and see the property. And it was amazing. The land was listed for $90,000. But because it had been on the market for so long and nobody could actually see what was there, we negotiated it down $20,000, bought it for $70,000 when the property was probably worth $120,000 to $150,000. So the cost of not maintaining property is huge, and then you have to take that cost and calculate it over time. So I hope that's making sense. You don't just want to buy a piece of property and let it sit fallow and let it grow up and let nature take over. There's not going to be a real ability to sell it at the end of that for maximum value. Make sure you're calculating in maintenance costs. The next thing you've got to calculate in is insurance, and it sounds weird. I'm buying a raw piece of land, right? There's just rocks and, hills and trees and whatnot. Okay. When I grew up in the 70s and 80s, it was a completely different animal than it is now. Okay, back then we would hit the creeks in the morning and fish and run through people's land, whatever. If we got hurt, we would limp back to the house, whatever. It wasn't a big deal. Okay, nowadays if you've got a piece of property, it doesn't matter if you've got a fence on it or not. You could have posted no trespassing signs and all this other stuff. If some moron walks out onto your land and gets bit by a snake or falls down a cliff or whatever, they're probably going to sue you. So it helps, and at this point, I would say you absolutely have to have, in my opinion, at least liability insurance on that land. Even beyond that, think if somebody's trespassing and dumping, okay, then you're the one that's got to end up cleaning up all of that, whatever they dump, the couches, refrigerators, and all of that other stuff. You're the one that's going to haul that away. That costs money. And going back to insurance for a second, umbrella coverages will help you. They'll shield you from lawsuits, but umbrella coverages aren't very cheap either. We've got a $3 million umbrella policy that's $600 a year, okay? If you carry that out over 10 years, just that umbrella policy alone is $6,000 in carrying costs over that time. If you get liability on top of that, again, which I fully recommend, you might be looking at $10,000, $11,000, $12,000 over the course of that investment. So you can see what I'm telling you in terms of make sure your math is taking everything into account. And the worst thing about this is a lot of these expenses people don't think about. Again, insurance is a big one. I don't know how many people are like, why would I want insurance on a raw piece of land? And then you explain it to them and they go, oh, okay, I get it. But then when you start compounding this with all the other costs and you realize if you don't have any income coming in, this is out of your pocket every year. This is money that has lost potential in some other type of investment. So you've got to be prepared for it from the very start. So let's start to talk about the opportunity cost here. Okay. We bought the piece of land for $150,000. Taxes over that 10 years, let's just say they're $25,000. Insurance, $10,000. Maintenance, $15,000. All of a sudden, you're into that land for $200,000. If you took $200,000 and invested it somewhere else, at 5% growth, you're looking at about $120,000 in growth over 10 years. If you can find 7% growth, you're probably closer to $180,000. And the reason I'm bringing this up is land doesn't just need to appreciate, it needs to outperform your other potential investments. And it doesn't just have to be put in a stock market or something like that. If you want to beat inflation, all right, they always say go into hard assets. Well, what are the other hard assets you can buy? You can buy housing, gold, silver, platinum, palladium, any of the precious metals. If you think about it from that perspective, are they going to outperform that land purchase? If they are, or if they might, why are you buying land? If you haven't calculated all this in, again, land doesn't just need to appreciate, it needs to outperform your other possible investments. And the worst thing I've ever heard, and I hear it a lot, well, when I sold the land, at least I didn't lose money. Well, holy crap, over 10 years, that's a terrible thing to say. And most land ends up in that exact same spot. All right, that was kind of the real quick, easy math lesson. So let's talk about when that regret actually hits home. Let's talk about selling land and the things that you need to consider now before you buy it for selling it later. So when you're selling it, you got to understand, first of all, your buyer pool for land is way smaller than it is for like a single family home or apartments or something like that. The financing is harder on it. It's harder for people to go get those loans. A lot of people don't have $150,000, $200,000 to go buy it in cash. The days on market are longer. In other words, it's going to sit on the market a heck of a lot longer. So if you're planning on selling it in 10 years, you may as well start trying to sell it in 9 so that you possibly will sell it in 11. And I know that's a little bit of a stretch, kind of hyperbole, but I hope you get my point there. And the worst part about it is if you get to a point where you absolutely have to sell that land to recoup your cash out of it, discounting is going to hurt because, again, smaller buyer pool, harder financing, you're going to have to discount a hell of a lot more than you would on some other asset to get it sold quickly. Now, saying all of that, guys, it's a real estate channel, right? I sell real estate, I sell land. There are times when buying land actually works. I just want to set up the times when it doesn't work. Now let's talk about when it actually does. The first thing you've got to understand when you're buying land, if you want it to work, it has to have a clear future use, okay? Buying land just for the sake of sitting on land and then selling it again at a later point usually is not going to work out. You have to know, okay, either there is growth coming out here, you know, the city is expanding, so I'm going to see appreciation from that. Okay, I can take this land, I can subdivide it, and I can sell off smaller pieces of land. Having an intended use, having a way to take it from what it is to something that's going to be more valuable is absolutely crucial to start. The second thing, and it makes sense with what we've talked about, you have to aggressively control your holding costs, okay? There's some you can't keep in check, right? You can't really do anything about your taxes. And if you go and improve your property, the taxes are probably going to go up a little bit faster and higher, okay? But what other things can you control? All right, well, you know, maintenance and clearing. Okay, if you go in and do a lot of the maintenance yourself, you can control some of that. If you're only going to control certain right-of-ways and maintain certain right-of-ways in there just to maintain passage in, out, and around the property, as opposed to doing the whole thing, that's another way that you can control it. Shopping your insurance every year and finding the best holder, and I don't mean going to like State Farm or Allstate or somebody like that and finding insurance. I mean going to an insurance broker and shopping 50, 60, 70 different insurance carriers and actually finding a carrier that's going to cover what you need to cover and not more or not less. That's a bigger importance. And it's also going to reduce that cost when you shop across a lot of carriers. So that's another thing you can control, but you've got to go to an insurance broker. You can't go to an individual carrier. The other thing that's going to save you is making sure that access and utilities are aligned early. Okay, all of my videos, I talk about access. You know, you've got to have access to it. Okay, great. If you don't have access, or if you have to pay more for access, or if it could go away in the future, it's going to end up killing your deals long term. But the other thing is utilities. Finding property that actually has utilities close by and available on the property or again close by, that's going to limit the amount of cost you have long term, but it's also going to make that land more valuable as well. So finding the right piece of property, again, goes back to, it may not be the cheapest piece of property, but it's going to have long-term better returns for you. And we talked about this earlier also with, if there's city or municipalities growing out, you need to find zoning that has multiple exit plans, okay? Again, will it allow you to put an RV park in? Will it allow you to build single family residences? Will it allow you to subdivide it into 1 acre parcels or 5 acre parcels? Okay, what does the zoning allow? A lot of times they talk about least restrictive use, and as long as the use you have for it is less restrictive than what the zoning calls for, you're going to be okay. But you also still have to check in with the county on that and make sure that that's the rules that they abide by. If you're looking in another state, like I often do, having those local resources on the ground is imperative at that point. Again, if you're in Texas, I can help you. If you're looking in other states and you don't have anybody there, let me know. I know builders, I know architects, I know lenders, I know agents in, hell, I think all 50 other, well, maybe not Alaska. I don't know if I know anybody in Alaska at this point, but the other states I'm pretty good at. So if you need resources, reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help you, but you've got to have those people locally that will tell you, hey, look, this is what the zoning is, this is what it means, this is what you can do, but what is less restrictive and that you can do below that are these 5 things. You've got to understand that zoning part of the problem. And then the other part of buying land that works is understanding. Demand is real. Demand isn't really a speculative thing. Yes, you can speculate. Okay, you're within 5 miles of a city and that city is growing out and they've expanded utilities. Okay, that's a little bit speculative, but it's a little bit different animal than buying remote land, okay? So if you are looking for something that's not necessarily right outside of a town, maybe you want something a little more remote, find out how many properties have sold there. Find out, are there actual comps for that property? Don't speculate on what the demand looks like. If you're like, yeah, right now this land has been on the market for 2.5 years and nobody's bought it, but I think in 10 years, this thing is gonna be worth a lot of money. You better have hard facts to back that up, or something that you can take to the bank. You don't want to be guessing on that, okay? Don't speculate demand. Either people want the property or they don't. And again, going back to selling, if this deal is going to work for you, if you're going to make money, you've got to have those multiple exit paths, right? And the only way to have any type of exit path is to have land that is in demand. Again, I was making a joke earlier that if you want to sell it in 10, start at 9 and maybe you'll sell it in 11. If you don't have property in an area that has demand for property, That's the quickest way to lose money on all this. So again, in order to make this all work, finding land that's actually valuable that people want to buy from you in the future is a huge key to the whole thing.